Hello everyone, and welcome back to Whisky Wednesday. We get to talk about something I didn't think we'd ever get to talk about today, which is Ardnamurchan. Bit of a mouthful, but one of two brand new, sort of, West Coast mainland distilleries. The other one being Nicnean, which I still can't get hold of any of them. That's a separate story. But Ardnamurchan, a couple of weeks ago, we reviewed the Adelphi blended whiskey, which is like 20 quid, bit funky, bit fun. And I mentioned in the video that they own Ardnamurchan, although I wasn't too sure about it. Turns out it was true. Happy days. This is the second release of their single malt. Now, there's a lot of information. The distillery opened and ran its first ever spirit in 2014. I don't forget the specific month and day. So we're dealing with some relatively old spirit. They only released their first bottle last year, which pretty much a solid 6-year-old. Because I forget the day they started distillation, we can safely assume this is a 6 and a bit year old. Not quite 7, maybe 6.5, probably a little bit younger. And it is all the fun things that whiskey drinkers want. It is natural colour, it is non-chill filtered, it is a combination of peated and unpeated barley. The peated barley is peated to around 30 to 35 ppm before distillation, and it is bottled at a wonderful strength of 46.8%, which is great. What more do you want? I've not tried many Adelphi single casks. I've never tried the first release of this. I like the blend, it's affordable and fun. So hopefully this should fit into the criteria quite well. It comes in a very well designed, but quite flimsy cardboard box. It's not the greatest thing in the world. This only cost me £60. It wasn't particularly expensive. And the particular title of it is the AD 012101, which I'm assuming means released on the 1st of January 2021 and batch 1 of this year, perhaps. AD either meaning Ardnamurchan or Adelphi, or Ardnamurchan Distillery, I assume it means. But it is a beautiful West Coast whiskey. The only real West Coast mainland distilleries for years have been Oban, very famously. Ben Nevis is a bit further inland near Fort William, but still on the West Coast and produces some peated and unpeated whiskey. But this is a combination of the two. It's owned by a really cool independent bottler. Everything's natural. It's £60 if you can find it. It's all ticking all the right boxes so far. But let's smell, let's taste, and let's see what's happening with Ardnamurchan. Okay, there's some interesting stuff on the nose. One thing I haven't mentioned already is the cask combination. I can't remember the exact percentages, but it's bourbon and Oloroso sherry. It's more bourbon than it is sherry. I think it's like 60-40, and it could possibly even be like 65-35 in the favour of bourbon, as you can tell by the colour, which is this beautiful kind of clear, almost like Chardonnay colour. The nose is a combination of a couple of interesting things. There's a little bit of a smoke, kind of like a tickle of smoke. I don't think I've ever used that phrase on this channel before, but we'll make it big. Tickle of smoke. And really pulling through, and I can't decide if it's the combination of bourbon and sherry or just the sherry being quite potent, but not in colour, but in smell. There's loads of milk chocolate, specifically for us Brits, and I suppose people around the world. Like, I know in America, Smarties are a different thing, but in the UK, Smarties are these like hard-shelled, like chocolate-scented candy things, and it smells a lot like Smarties. But with a spiciness and a smokiness to it. The second big flavour is, smell I should say, is almost like a bell pepper sort of smell. If you cut into a bell pepper, be it red, green or yellow, you always get this kind of whoosh of the water coming out of it. That kind of clean, almost like agave, youthful spirit. Not quite tequila, I don't want to use that word because it might put some people off, because not everyone's a tequila fan, but certainly a youthful spirit-driven nose with earthiness, a little bit of smoke, and some beautiful milk chocolate notes. There's some white pepper. It's kind of lemony. It almost has like, if you imagine a Kalila, but it sweeter, like a sweeter Kalila. It's been in the glass for about 10 minutes. There's a slight mintiness, almost like eucalyptus. It's not as offensive as things like toothpaste, but a fresh mintiness, which I've not experienced from bourbon cask single malt in quite a while. So that's like a nice familiar note. And I hate to use the word because it's used constantly when we hear about Clynelish, but it does have a waxiness to it. And when I say waxiness, I mean kind of like citrus peels and citrus skins, but there is almost like a candle wax note to it, like a scented candle wax. There's almost like a coconut note as well. So quite a lot for a young whiskey, certainly something that is sub 7 years old. But let's taste it, let's score it, let's see how it fares. Okay, it's nowhere near as sweet. The smoke's coming through, the earthiness is coming through, the bitterness is making itself known. The initial arrival is kind of almost like soured fruit, grapefruit, apricot, and then that turns into really herbal, very green, earthy notes like pine needles, or pine, I should say, more mint. There's almost like a rosemary note. And then following that up is all of this smoke. Now, it's not a particularly potent whiskey, but it's quite deep in flavour for something which is sub 10 years old. Yeah, it's really like, there's the pine, and then there's this follow-up of like, I don't want to use the word coriander because I know some people hate it, but coriander, parsley, salty, gentle. Oh, there's the chocolate note again. That's interesting. Okay. So it really transforms from like bittersweet tart fruit into green, earthy, sort of fresh with pine and mint flavors. Then the bittersweet smoke follows up, and then there's a really nice, like kind of, what's it called? Like a topic circle. It's like a A-level English literature coming back there. It repeats, and that chocolate note comes all the way back around to finish on almost like a nuttiness too, almost like hazelnut, walnut. That is a lot of flavour for a 6 and a bit year old. But luckily it's kind of quite undiluted in its approach to everything. We'll taste it one more time, maybe not as in depth with the notes this time, and just see what's happening. Yeah, it's the finish with this thing. The palate's really mellow. The palate's pretty clean. It's just nice. There's no better word than just nice to describe it. But the finish is just where all of this magic happens. It really cuts through with West Coast goodness, you know? Because it's a Highland, but it's got a solid amount of peat running through it. So it's the best bits of things like Kalila and Talisker, and to a degree Highland Park. But then it's also got like that waxiness of Clynelish, that wonderful coastal saltiness of like Old Pulteney. Arguably even Campbelltown style flavours. That's delicious. That's really good. That's the best 60 quid I've spent in a very long time. Actually, there's a video coming out in a couple of weeks, which is going to be another good 60 quid. But this is really well made for something which isn't particularly old, and in the grand scheme of things, in the current world, isn't overly expensive. That is a solid 8.5 from me. That is a delicious whiskey with a lot going on inside it. I can't wait till it reaches 10 to see what different stuff is going on then. Yeah, Ardnamurchan, second ever release, AD/01.21:01, long name. That is a solid 8.5 out of 10. A delicious product. So thank you all for watching. Hopefully some of you have a bottle of it. If not, I think some of it is still in the wild somewhere. But yeah, thank you all for watching. This is Whisky Wednesday. I'm Phil, and we'll see you all next week. Cheers.